My name is Jurline Redeaux. Currently, I am a CSW3, and in layman's term, that means I'm a Children's Social Worker 3 for Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. And but my actual job title is a P3. What we do, for lack of a better word, is family finding. So when a foster youth is first detained, and this is pretty new, like within the last 3 years, P3 workers have been doing locating families for like about 10 or 11. But within the last 3 years, they thought, why do we wait until the kid gets to the back of their case? Why don't we try to connect them with a P3 worker at the beginning? So I like to call myself a detective, because when the youth comes into the system, I am assigned a case along with their case carrying social worker and a dependency investigator. So that puts me right there where I can obtain the information. And my job is actually to make sure that that youth stay connected with everybody he or she was connected with before they came into the system.
Okay.
Traditionally, when I started back in 93, I was in adoptions, 96, I'm sorry. So we got the case after family reunification failed. But this way, Chloe, I am so excited because oftentimes I'm able to link a paternal side of the family with the maternal side. And that's why they call us permanency workers, because that's our role. And we're so new that some people in the department don't even know what we do. So now you know.
That's amazing. And what's a typical workday like for you? You've touched on all of the responsibilities you have. Are you in the office a lot? Are you out in the field?
Because I'm a retiree, I retired in 2008. And one of the things that they thought, which I was wonderful, why not rehire retirees? We already know the system, we already know the cases, we know the office. Most of the time, you're fortunate to get placed in your own office, but I wasn't. But it didn't matter because when I had been in various positions within DCFS. So with us being retirees, we only can work 20 hours a week, like maximum. So I'm part time. And for the whole fiscal year, we can only work 900. A typical day for me really starts with me getting assignment from my supervisor when the child is newly detained. And what we call that in DCFS, it's a 300. A 300 means that it's under the WIC code 300, child welfare, child abuse. Any type of abuse, that is called a 300. So that case comes into the division. It gets assigned to what we call an ER worker. And from the ER worker, they're to do a referral to our unit. And then I'll get an assignment from my supervisor. So when I get that case, and they made a lot of changes that's ridiculous. But when I get that case, because I am virtual, I was already virtual before COVID-19, but we were required to at least go into the office 2 days a week. Before COVID-19, I interviewed all family members that I could locate. Mandatory interview the child. And they started wanting us to go see the babies. Why? I don't know, because they can't tell me, but it's a bureaucracy. So that's a typical day prior to COVID-19. I will look at my case. Before I would do anything, I would read the background. I have all the information. That's why I love virtual. I really think now that's one good thing DCFS had on the board already, is that I have the case. Let's say you and I are on the team together. Everything that you see, I see. I get to read the detention report. I get to read all contacts. I get to look at all the collaterals. So I get to familiarize myself with the case. And because we don't have a lot of kids, I can spend a great deal of time calling family members. We have search engines that we only have. For example, I have a Facebook account. So we can really get into that case really quickly and start identifying who are the main connections. Mom and dad, but sometimes mom and dad don't tell you the truth. Sometimes you can't find them. So what I love about my position, because I have a very inquisitive mind, that I immediately, and then I was online and I was a supervisor and I was a team decision making facilitator. So I came already packaged with a skill set that let me make quick assessments and able to really look at a case and start drawing conclusions and doing my search. So I'm really, really fortunate, excuse me, that I came with such a complete skill set. And you must be computer literate. And most of the people that retire in my age group, they didn't. But when I was online and when I supervised, I wanted to know everything that my workers were doing. If they had a report that I wasn't familiar with, I would type it. So I was always, from the beginning, way back when computers came out, I had the very first one. That's one of the core components of the job that I do. And that's being able to use your search engines to go in and out of your, what we call CWS, CMS. It's our child recording system. And since I have such an excellent skill set, I really enjoy the job. It's not challenging for me. So I really feel, Chloe, that we should have been doing this all of the time, because we're very successful with the whole goal of P3 is to locate family and to get the child out of foster care as quickly as we can. And we have 90 days to assist the worker in locating family. And once I locate that family, my job is to update it in the computer. So if I found your grandmother, for example, then I would go into the system, put your phone number, your address, what your intent. I would say to you, do you want to stay connected? Are you interested in placement? And so to me, I see myself as a child welfare detective. And it's the fun part of the job. And it's challenging too, because we have to work with a lot of workers who are not familiar with what we do. And that's where the challenge come in. But if you work for bureaucracy, you're going to have to know how to get around it. So I really enjoy it. So that's a typical day for me, is reading the case.
It sounds a lot like detective work. You're right. Touched on the technology side. I'm curious, since you've had such a long career in the field, what was the work like before there was this much technology accessible for you to use?
I was very fortunate. When I came to the department in 1996, they were converting to the system that I just told you. The acronyms mean Child Management System, Child Welfare something. But fortunately for me, because I had already a good background in computers, been working on them for years, the old guard, people that came in when they were out of high school and were getting ready to retire, totally wouldn't do it. One lady just refused. So for me, it was always there. This technology, the only thing that's new for me is the virtual, having my desktop with me. But in terms of when I was online as an adoptions worker, I still had to document. The only difference, I had to write court reports. So that means you had to assess, you had to report to the court every 6 months, whatever. But other than the technology piece, because I came in at the cutting edge when they were switching, I was already there. So it was already people that were there before me, which retired with me, they're still challenged because they were not used to the technology.
Right. You adapted.
I became a pro.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well,
actually, I became the lead worker, and from the lead worker, I got promoted to supervisor pretty quickly. I had a pretty short career with DCFS, whereas I worked for the feds. So what I did was I took my federal time and bought that time back. So my actual working for the department prior to me coming back this time was like 10 years. So mostly everybody retired with 40 and 30 and 40. I left with 18. I wasn't planning to, but unfortunately, I had to leave for my own mental health. So, this is a very good segue into why it is so important to me and why I'm passionate about it.
Right. Yeah, that was actually my next question is what personal experiences led you to want to work in the field you do or led you to be passionate about mental health?
Well, actually, social work was almost like a natural because I grew up in a family. I grew up in the Midwest, Chicago. I'm the youngest and the closest to my mother and the only girl. So I think I spent a lot of times watching her, and I seem to always have this problem solving brain. But I really started out wanting to be a secretary. And I was one for the department when I worked for the federal government. But what really started me on this path, Chloe, and I'm glad that you asked me this question, was my mom struggled with her physical health. And I wasn't even in school, wasn't thinking about becoming a social worker, but innately I felt that her physical ailments were connected to her mental. And this was way back in the 80s. I didn't go back to graduate school until 93, and I didn't go back to get my bachelor's until 80 something something. I'm old now. But anyway, I wanted to say my mother. I really thought her diabetes, that was her challenge, was obesity and diabetes. I was a military wife, so I really left home pretty early, but we still connected, very much connected. And I was just really concerned about why did she get diabetes in the middle age? So I went to the military doctor and he said she has something called mid onset and she can get off of the medicine and she can do well. She just have to change your diet. And I'm thinking, oh my God, because I was thinking I was going to get it just because she got it. And then I was all gung-ho about telling my mom, you know what, you can do this, you can do that. But later on, when I really started going back to school and taking child psychology, and you know how we all studied the family. The family was where you started. And in studying my family, I saw my mom had a lot of stress on her that she did not talk about, because you don't talk about it. You just pray about it, and you just take it. And I just felt like, no, mom, I want to be a social worker, and I want to be able to help my mother deal with the mental health piece, really. But unfortunately, she passed away when I was in graduate school,
Right.
and that was my drive. And I became a medical. My concentration was medical. So that lets you know that this whole thing about her diabetes, and I watched her deteriorate. And it wasn't the diabetes. I always felt it was the mental health piece. But no one in our family talked about it. But honestly, I think most of the women in our family were clinically depressed. That's just Jurline's assessment. And I know that I had to address my own family issues in graduate school. So I told everybody it was the best therapy I ever had, because I had to dissect my family and look at my issues before I would be in a position to help somebody else. Because you got to be aware of your triggers. You got to know where you were in the family. We talked a lot about family, like, where were you in the family? Were you the youngest? Were you the middle child? And how that impacted. And I just really thank God for my education, because that is what really started me on the path of mental health awareness, although I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah. I think that happens with a lot of students when they're in school. They might start not having the most clear idea of where they're going, but as they take certain classes, they really feel like they find their path. But as I heard you talking about your mother, it kind of made me think about how a lot of people don't connect the link between physical health and mental health. they kind of view them as separate issues. What else do you think that the, society as a whole gets wrong about mental health? There's some misconceptions people have about it.
Well, way back when she was diagnosed, and I'm going to say it was probably the 80s or the late 70s, the doctors didn't have a clue. See, they just got on board making the connection, which is quite shocking, because you would think with all the training that they had and all of the stuff, but they were never really trained to deal with, and they didn't make the connection. But I'm gonna tell you, Chloe, what really did it for me is when my mother was diagnosed. Initially, she was taking the pill, but then she broke her ankle, and from her ankle, the sugar went straight to type 2, where she had to take insulin. And they told my mom, they gave her an orange, and they said, practice on this orange. And I'm thinking, what about this up here? Because that would take me somewhere. I remember when I was young, I had to have gallbladder surgery. Really, really young. I was like in my 20s. And my then husband, I don't like to say ex, I like then husband. My then husband, who was a Marine, he took me to the doctor. And I remember telling the doctor, oh no, I'm not having surgery. I just thought they could give me some medicine. But I had gallstones, and then they couldn't do it laparoscopic. And I'm like, oh no. And then I literally went into some kind of a meltdown. So I think for me, society, just my own experience with me and seeing how my mother eventually could not live a full life because she actually was a healthy person. But once she started down that path, it's like the mental and the physical, it just started to just get, worse and worse because she was getting sicker and sicker. What I think society totally gets wrong is to separate the two. They don't see that you get a chronic, even now, because I do a lot of advocacy around endometrial cancer, because I'm an endometrial cancer survivor. And one of the things, even now, they don't talk to you about your mental health. They don't say, Jurline, you know what? I was fortunate, the clinic that I was going to, because they assigned a social worker. But when I listen to other women talk about their experience, they never get to talk to a social worker. And the doctors just do not recognize that once you get a chronic diagnosis, it's got to impact your emotional feelings. Those two they go together. But even today, even with the COVID, even with the healthcare disparities, even with them talking about how African Americans and Latinos and Native Americans are getting in and they're dying faster, you hear very little conversation about mental health. It's still almost like it's stigmatized in a way. And that's why I love mental health awareness, because I've had an opportunity to talk to so many churches and schools and my own family about the importance of just keying into that, getting in tune with the body mind. And a lot of African Americans and like a lot of other cultures, they rely a lot on faith. And when you talk about you are having depression or anxiety, they're just going to say, well, honey, you know what, you're just going to have to pray about that, because God can help you. He can get you back. God can you're just going to have to pray. And unfortunately, it's stigmatized. To answer your question, even today it's stigmatized. It needs more people like me who look normal that can go into a room and say, yeah, I suffer from anxiety and PTSD, depression. You know why? I was bullied in the workplace. So now I got an audience. They're looking at somebody who they thought was just going to come in and tell them some psychological and some esoteric. Then they see somebody who's like them. And the kids, I love it because the kids open up about bullying. I went to career day at my grandson's school. And when I mentioned that I was bullied in the workplace, our whole conversation changed from what I do for a living to them being bullied. And I was so happy that they felt comfortable enough to share among their peers how they felt. Shoes didn't have the right shoes, and then they made fun of them. These things are happening in the third and fourth grade, and that will cause you to have a mental health challenge somewhere along the line.
So it sounds like there's still a lot of struggles today, but there are some progress being made as well with, the kids being more open with talking about it and there being more awareness. But we still have a long way to go.
I was just thinking about this before, when I was doing my errands today. Everybody knows what the pink ribbon represents, right? When you see the pink ribbon, what do you think about?
Breast cancer.
What do you think about when you see the green ribbon?
I'm not sure.
Mental health awareness.
Wow.
And what my goal is, sorry, my ribbon dropped. What my goal when I joined an organization called Each Mind Matters. You might have heard about it. What they wanted us to do as ambassadors is to go out and we've been to different conferences. We go to healthcare, health fairs. We want this ribbon, Chloe, to be just as recognizable as the pink. That shows you how much emphasis. See, breast cancer took over everything, even our cancers. I'm the one who's promoting Peach. I started a Peach Project because I am the CEO of a nonprofit that I started after I retired in 2008. But this is what it's about. Mental health awareness. When you see Jurline with this on, you know that, okay, this is someone who understands and she's aware and she wants me to say, what does that stand for? And I worked at church one Sunday and one man said, hey, what does that green ribbon stand for? And I told him it stands for mental health awareness and the need to be open and talk about it and educate. And it leads to other conversations, that it's okay to talk about it. So you're absolutely right, Chloe. We have a long way to go, but I think what MHRCET is doing, what you're doing, what I'm doing in my own advocacy work that we do with our agency, we are making an inroads because what I've been able to do is combine endometrial cancer awareness with mental health. Anytime I talk about, I just did a Zoom call and I should have sent it to you, a Zoom live on Saturday. When it was time for me to talk, I was very transparent that when you are diagnosed, be sure to talk to the doctor about any mental health feelings. It doesn't, just any feelings that you have that are dark or fearful, because that's your team. And I was very open with my team by telling them I'm already on this med, and so consequently I probably gonna need double, but I didn't. I'm always a jokester with them, but I wanted them to know that I need to have this treated right along with the cancer, and that was the advocacy for myself. Had I not told them, how would they know? How would they know to control for that? How would they know to refer me to a support group or a social worker, which I had access to? So Miller's, where I had my treatment, they are way ahead of the curve when it comes to merging the two. I just wish that we can get that around, especially in cancer treatment and diagnosis. How can you treat somebody with a potentially life-threatening disease and you don't talk about, well, Jurline, how does that make you feel that potentially this might kill you?
Right. Wow. Yeah, you're right. You're so right. And I guess aside from being someone who has both experienced it personally and has worked in the system for so long, how else do you recommend that someone advocate for themselves? for mental health treatment aside from just communicating with their doctors?
The number one thing that I do, Chloe, that you mentioned, is what most people don't do. They don't see their general practitioner as someone who can treat their mental health. And I'm always warning, I'm always sharing with them, he's an MD. He, he can write all your psychotropic meds for you. If you don't feel comfortable right now going to a therapist or a psychiatrist, start with your general practitioner. I said, because that's the person who you've already developed a relationship. And I remember now that we're talking a long time ago when I was a military wife and I was at home, and I was always a person who wanted to be a career woman. And I was at home with the kids and my husband was out to deployment, and I was always laying on my sofa. And I just didn't seem to have any energy at all. So then I made an appointment with my general practitioner. Fortunately, he was forward thinking, very young doctor. All of our doctors are corpsmen for the Marine Corps. So the Navy takes care of the Marines. And I'll never forget, Chloe, what he said. He said, well, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't do anything. I just stay at home. I just sleep all the time. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I would love to go to work. He said, well, why don't you? And I'm like, I never thought about that. And just me going to him, way back then, I knew something was wrong with me because I just was so lethargic and tired and didn't seem to have any interest in anything. No, didn't know nothing about depression, but those are the signs. You don't have any interest in anything. You're tired, you're lethargic. But I knew, it just seemed like, Chloe, from a very young woman, I always was so in tune with my body. And I'll tell you why. Because I watched my mom not be in tune with hers. And and they said in graduate school, oh, whatever your parents do, you're going to do. Well, excuse me, I was always the one to raise my hand. I said, no, I did absolutely the opposite. Then they want to shut me up. But really, her not being in tune with her body, the constant struggle with the weight, I do too. But I exercise, I monitor, I go talk to the doctors. I've been to therapy. I've been to I don't know how many clinics. I even thought about weight loss surgery to the point that I was almost ready to have the surgery. So for my mom, she just took it as, y'all, everybody got to die with something. See, you guys drink and smoke. All I do is eat. That was her logic. And I'm like, that makes totally no sense.
Yeah.
And then she would say stuff like, I don't know why I'm eating, because I'm not hungry. That was that drive. So really, I think that's the first thing I would start with. The other thing that I do and help them to learn how to advocate for themselves, I always tell them something simple. I love it when I do this with the young guys. I said, take out your medical card. And, the ones that got it, they take it out. I said, flip it over. I said, what does it say? Does it say anything about mental health? And then they'll say, yeah, it's a number on here. It's a number that I can call. There you go. Bingo. You ain't got to tell nobody. You can just pick up that phone and say, hey, I'm feeling, especially with suicide prevention, because I kind of like, especially when I'm speaking with the youth, I tell them how they can be actively participating in activities that potentially can lead to them, maybe harming themselves, not being aware. And then I would give them scenarios. So you're absolutely right, Chloe. The two most important things that I tell any group that I'm talking to, start with your general practitioner, because it could be a medical reason that's causing the lethargy, and even when we're in school, the first assessment, and most people forget it when they get in the field, is when you're talking to a client, no matter what they tell you, you always refer them back to the general practitioner, the medical doctor, because you don't want to just say, go see therapist Jane, when it might be something physical that they need to attend to. And once people find out that they don't really have to go to a psychiatrist to get medication, then it really kind of like relieves that anxiety, because they have such a negative view, because people have called people with mental health challenges crazy, cuckoo, weird. So it's just been so stigmatized for so long that the average person really don't want to share. Even people who are educated and, have been to school and have PhDs, a lot of times they don't want to share. Actually, it's a disability. Embrace it. I do. You didn't do it to yourself. It's just like anybody with a disability, but it can be corrected. That's where I get my greatest joy, is letting them know that you can recover. You can get back on track. And it really isn't all that complex. It's things that you can do, the happy endorphins, exercise, doing something that you love, engaging in a hobby, joining a support group. It's so many things. When they find out all the opportunities that they have, it's almost like you open up a door for them, because it's like, wow, I don't have to share with everybody. No, you get to share with who you want to share with. It's confidential. It's confidential information. Once you tell your therapist something, it's confidential. Unless you're suicidal, homicidal, then we're mandated reporters. And if you abuse child or animal, we mandated reporters. So you put that out there in the beginning. I think the whole thing, even in our own community, we have to establish a way to get out from behind those LCSWs, MSW, MFT. Throw that out the window and engage with that person that's in front of you, and use your training the way we were taught. Meet them where they're at. You can't take somebody to Freud when they had never even heard of therapy, period. They don't even understand it. But oftentimes, and I say that because of who I've been in therapy, a lot of times I'm thinking to myself, after this session, I'm not coming back. So that's another insight that I have when I'm talking to groups and families, and I'm at a health fair. I'm giving it to you from my own perspective. And you do what makes you feel good, but don't minimize it. Don't ignore it. Don't think it's going to go away if you don't do anything but pray, because I pray too. So that, we connect on all those levels. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think the work that MHRCET is doing is why I have so much respect, because it's getting to the people that need it in a fashion that they will understand it and embrace it.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that the mission is really important and the work is really inspiring, and we're so glad to have you as a connection and friend of the organization. And I really thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and sharing so much. Before we end our interview, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm just thankful to have found this partnership, because this is what I believe that it should look like. It should be accessible to everybody, regardless of your social economic. It should be in a fashion that's good, whether it's a game or the materials. And I just want to talk about Each Mind Matters for a minute. But what I love about them is they call these novellas, and it's in English and it's in Spanish. And it's really, it's in different, like, for example, African American, it would have a minestrone. And what I love about Each Mind Matters, that's the only thing I like to say, They, in my experience, have the most resources in the most languages and culturally appropriate. That's what really is going to turn the tide. The more people we can talk to in their own culture, with people that look like them, look at this little family, like, and it's normal. It's not any of the other stuff, and it's simple, and it's non-threatening. So other than that, I'm honored for the partnership, and I'm honored to be interviewed for something so important and to share my insight so that people will understand that it's okay. Just like we have physical health problems, we also have mental health problems. They are connected.